global warming, everyone, or perhaps one should be merciless and say global warming and extinction of the species. If you don't know what that's all about, find out. I won't. I'm not a news show, so I'm not gonna start explaining all that. Besides, it's awfully depressing. Now, I quite honestly, I haven't been able to do a video, a rant video. I quite honestly, it has been absolutely impossible, since I did the last one. Long story, lots of interesting twists and turns, or perhaps not so interesting. But, after I had my month's holiday, as I know that's a luxury, it has been absolutely impossible. No way. So I have a huge backlog, but I have to start with ignorance too, because it started to bug me. Again, I've been away, from making a video a long time, so a lot has happened. And pretty much the first things that happened after I went for my holiday was the insane, I don't know how to say it, truck attack in France, and the strangest coup attempt ever invented in Turkey. And combined with my several of my videos, it brought to me this idea of how one ends up being ignorant even if one doesn't want to. Firstly, of course, I mean, it's always interesting to hear oneself talk about anything, like when I talked about Austria. You would never know that I know quite a lot about Austria, and Turkey, for that example, for that matter. Really, I mean, not only do I, pretty much know what goes on in them. Yeah, I know their geography. I've played both countries dozens of times in Europa Universalis with great success. I know. I'm with some coaching. I could probably name all the Holy Roman Emperors. But you would never know it, because my form of expression here is rant, and somehow if you rant in a foreign language, again, you don't come off as intelligent as it probably would be prudent. Anyway, but the second one was. That well, pretty much you cannot, since one does not speak every language on earth, you can't get enough information about anything, because you need firstly to speak the language, and secondly to have stuff, to watch on YouTube or whatever, or read. And at the moment, the combination of the two, really, the only country, I'm not quite certain whether I know enough about Finland, and I live here. The only country I can definitely, or let's say, I can definitely form my own opinion. I can have an opinion which I can think is right and accurate and so on, is the United States. It's the only place on earth where firstly, of course, not just myself, but so many other people speak the language, even though, whatever Henry Higgins said about the United States speaking of English, still I can understand it. And it's the only nation that has enough flow, enough YouTube channels of information, enough independent media, enough people who just want to say what they think, and so on. Is the only place where one can get enough information so that one actually can have an educated opinion. It's absolutely insane. Again, both with France and with Turkey, which are both European countries, and I also know the French history damned well. I've also played France in Europa Universalis with great success. I don't know enough. Again, with the attack, awful, sick, insane terrorist attack in France. I don't know enough. I personally, again, it seemed they're more like a problem of lunatics being allowed on the streets instead of having treatment, and again the very old neoliberalist story where all the capital, all the money, all the resources are taken away from countries and governments and given to few billionaires, mostly foreign billionaires, to their secret accounts in the Cayman Islands and whatnot, and simply France, like any other modern country, just simply not having enough resources. And the guy who drove the truck, it doesn't matter if he had connections to ISIS or whatever, if he had developed some sort of a religious motive or something, he was nuts, and a reasonably young guy, complete nutcase, a lunatic, and he should have been in treatment. And we have the classic of lunatics running around in the streets instead of being in care. Anyway, the second one was of course Turkey, and if when it comes to coups, okay, Turkey is an expert on the subject, but if there is Erdogan, of course, is among their in the top 3 world leaders who really should be toppled in any sort of a of course bloodless coup. Wherever there's bloodletting, that's a no-no. That shouldn't happen, period. So anyway, but when this thing, I was again one of those people again who were watching it live, this coup unfolding, and I mean my reaction from the very start was that this is the most amateurish coup, and considering that the Turks should be semi-professionals in military coups. They've had lots of experience. That this is the most amateurish, inefficient military coup I've ever heard of, and I originally I was almost convinced that it was a setup, by Erdogan. I mean, and his whoever is. I mean, nobody is totally alone. No matter what sort of a mad dictatorial nutter they always have friends, you know. They always, all of them have, you know, few people helping them. So Erdogan and his people, his minions, and of course later all the information that comes, it seems that it was genuine and it was panic. Gulen's another complete idiot, but some of his people close to him in the military, I guess, started to feel the heat and did something really desperate, and through that something very silly. I don't know. And again, was there an actual attempt to kidnap Erdogan? And perhaps then it would have worked. I don't know, but it still seems very a bad idea and a stupid coup. But anyway, one cannot know all these things. It is impossible. Again, it was quite legitimate to suggest that perhaps this was something that was orchestrated by Erdogan and his minions, because obviously the shooting down of the Russian fighter jet was. I mean, there seemed to be an official story that was like, spur of a moment, okay, we've had enough. Let's shoot down the fighter plane. No. Now, that had been decided at the highest level long before. You know, there had been a conscious thought, let's most likely murder 2 Russian jet pilots. And again, it's considering how quickly Vladimir Putin was ready to forget this murder. That should again go to show you the extent of his real patriotism, considering that that's probably part of his thing, you know, patriotism, strong man. But again, I cannot be certain. None of these countries. It is just impossible. I don't speak French. I don't speak Turkish. I don't speak Russian. Although I'm hoping to correct that at some point. After all, it is a big and noisy neighbor. So one really should, as a Finn, one should know some Russian. But anyway, so far I don't. And none of them have this sort of I wouldn't say freedom, because the United States does not have freedom, but let's say this ill will that the United States have, and this need to bring yourself, you know, to say something and make and get your voice heard. You know, none of these nations have it. That the United States have, or many of them, and myself have. So I don't know. I don't exactly know. What do the French people think about their government and the state of their mental care? I don't know what the Turkish people or the Russian people are thinking, because I can't, so to speak, get inside them, inside their heads. I can't get enough information. I have no idea. It seems that the people in Turkey, that they support Erdogan. One cannot, for the life of one, understand why. You know, Turkey has had very good times, and it should be obvious to any reasonable person that the Erdogan government is not a good one. But one has no information. And the same thing, the whole world was actually doing pretty well during Boris Yeltsin's time. And the Vladimir Putin time has not been all that good, to Russia or to the world. Do Russian people really like him? I don't know.